What if I told you there's a world out there with the most beautiful gleaming colors? A world full of mesmerizing treasures where you find joy and purity and abundance. What if I told you that you can find an endless universe within yourself? Are you ready for a journey? Then come with us and discover the colors of the universe. Now, on Ascension Radio, Studio 3.
Welcome to the Colors of the Universe. I'm your host, Evie, and today our guest again is Prism Sovereign. In our last show, we talked about a lot of topics, and today I would like to start with the topic knowledge versus wisdom. Hi, Prism, how are you?
Hello, Evie. Lovely to speak to you again.
Yeah, I'm excited, just as excited as yesterday. It's always fun to talk to you. Prism, do you want to start with some thoughts about knowledge and wisdom, or knowledge versus wisdom?
Ooh, I would suppose the first thing I would say um, would be there isn't necessarily a versus, although I do understand that perspective. Um, to me, knowledge and wisdom go hand in hand. They work together. Um, Now, for myself, because I'm claircognizant, I have an innate knowing as soon as I hear something or as soon as I feel something. It kind of connects with that ancient part of me. And and so to me, that is more uh, a uh, a wisdom, right? And I believe that all of us have that to a certain degree, where we tap into our feelings when we hear something, and there's a wisdom that is there, is ancient. It's simply part of our DNA. It's built into us. If we're willing to cognize enough information that we can describe the feeling, then we can tap into that wisdom. The the knowledge that we gain, that we gather as we go through life, as we go through experiences, is so important for us to be able to recognize the wisdom that we have inside of us. So I kind of see them as going together, but if we were to separate them completely, knowledge versus wisdom, I would say wisdom is something that's gained from experience. It could be experience that we already have had in, say, past lifetimes, if I can go there, part of our DNA, part of our innate that we already have within us, or something that is gained from the knowledge that we've accumulated. And then knowledge is the procuring of experience after experience after experience. Whether that's reading something and that being the experience, or going through it yourself physically and that being the way that you accumulate the knowledge. So they are two very different things, but you need both to have one or the other, I believe.
Yeah, so when do you use knowledge and when do you use wisdom, or do you use both at the same time?
Wisdom comes from knowledge. Um, if you do not have information, then you cannot have the experience. The information comes either through teaching or on the experience. So wisdom is the byproduct of that. And it all depends on the level of consciousness that a person has. In the last show, we talked a little bit about consciousness and people vibrating at different levels. some having a lower consciousness and some having a higher consciousness. Usually people with a higher consciousness have a much more open mind, and they can integrate more things, and they can accept more things and transmute more things. And people with a lower level of consciousness, they tend to be very set in their ways. It's very difficult to get them to even explore something new, not to mention accept it. So wisdom usually comes from a consciousness going up, from someone who had a lower consciousness going up into a higher consciousness and becoming more wise because they are allowing more into their cognitive space. They're processing more, so they have a wider perspective. And then therefore they can act wisely, appropriately on that perspective.
So what would you say, how do you access wisdom, or how do you get to that higher perspective?
It's all through experience. All through experience. Wisdom comes from experience. They say hindsight is 20/20, right? After you've gone through something, you can look back and say, oh, I wish I hadn't done this, or I wish I hadn't done that. And so then we can look at a future experience and find the similar patterns and the similar things so that we can make a wise decision as to what we will do, as opposed to the prior experience when we didn't have that knowledge. All wisdom, I believe, comes from experience. That is why the white hair or gray hair is always seen as a sign of wisdom, because it means that person has a higher level of experience than someone who doesn't.
That actually brings up a topic about old souls or younger souls. Do you have thoughts to that?
An old soul is someone who, a being in whatever form, that has been around for millennia, a very, very, very long time. Time being subjective, once again, time doesn't exist everywhere, but synchronicity does. So experience does exist everywhere, even in the still space of the heart where there is no polarity. It is still experience, because you are still experiencing bliss. But for the old soul has usually been through, in some cases, hundreds of millennia, maybe hundreds of thousands, if not more, lifetimes. And so the old soul has, in most cases, has this innate knowing. Old souls don't cave as much to peer pressure and things like that, because they have been through that energy so many times that they're the ones that will look at everybody else doing something that, say, isn't the healthiest for them, and they'll be like, no, I don't even want to try that, because it just seems like a dumb thing to do. More than likely, it's only a being that has an older soul that is going to respond that way, because the younger souls, they tend to want to experience everything. And so old souls tend to be a little bit more withdrawn. They tend to be a little less about the experience, especially if they feel that that experience is something that is not going to be beneficial to them. They're not having that experience usually because anybody else wants them to do it. They tend to have experiences more so because they want to do it, or because they want to show a person love. this sort of thing, old souls tend to be very empathic. So they are very self-empowered in a lot of cases because their energy already knows. If that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does. You already mentioned it a bit, but maybe you can talk a bit more about what would you say are the difference between an old soul and a young soul living on Earth right now, because we have very challenging times right now. So, what do you think are the differences?
Well, the new souls coming into the planet right now are very, very, very elevated beings. Very elevated beings. What I mean by that is they have a much higher consciousness because they are here to rebuild the earth after all of the enslavement that has been here. Many in the collective still may not realize, many people still may not realize how close we are to the turning point of all of civilization, all of humanity coming back to our sovereign placement here on Earth, being sovereign beings and totally within honor and self-love of ourselves. It's a little bit difficult to explain because so many people are used to following what the government says, paying taxes, doing what they're told to do. They go to school, they go to university, they go through all of these conditionings and programs that are put there to make them good little slaves, if I can put it that way. I know it's a little harsh, but it's truthful. And so very few really know what it's like to be in a position of sovereignty. There's all of these children coming in now within the last, well, I'd say 15 years or so. And they're very stubborn because they feel like they are sovereign beings. They don't want to work a job. They don't want to they don't want to follow anyone else's rules. They don't want to do any of these things. And so they have been actually targeted in many ways by the pharmaceutical industry, by the government, things like this, because they're not following the programs that have been laid out for them. As far as, being good little slaves, they don't want to be. They want to have their adventure. They want to have their experiences. They want to be very free. I use the word sovereign usually instead of free because free actually comes from a term meaning that enslavement is still there. So I don't usually use the word free very often, but in this case, simply to be on the same verbal level, I'll use the word free so that no one gets confused. These children that have been coming into the planet, they don't want to do what they're told. They're not good students. They are not they're not good employees because they have no desire to do that. They don't find pride in it. Our parents, our grandparents, they were very much so about hard work, and you find pride and you take pride in your work, and you take care of your family through hard work and things like that. And this newer generation is not there. They're a much higher consciousness. They do not want to be controlled on any level by anyone. They want to be fully free, fully sovereign unto themselves. It doesn't make them selfish necessarily. They simply want to be free, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they do follow a very different mandate. So that is not necessarily a sign of an old soul, but it can be. And it's difficult. It's difficult because some of them are old souls and some of them are new souls. And what has happened is the pharmaceutical industry has used things like ADHD medication and whatnot to bring those individuals back under control. And it's worked very well. Unfortunately, they become very sedated and they haven't really been fighting to the same level because of what's being put in their bodies. And sometimes from a very young age. I mean, I've heard as young as several months, doctors have given infants ADHD medications, which is positively despicable, in my opinion. But it's not so much the old soul or the young soul in this particular space right now, in the synchronicity of the universe right now, in this time, in this moment, age, if you will. I think that's probably the better word to use, is this age. It is the inner standing of consciousness, and there will be those who are able to integrate the higher energies because they have been through this many times. An old soul, for instance, will have a much easier time integrating these higher energies that we are going into, these fourth dimension and higher fourth dimension energies, and then into fifth, sixth, and seventh dimension energies. But the younger souls, not necessarily the younger ages, but the younger souls will have a much harder time doing it because they haven't had as many lifetimes where they've liberated planets and things like that. I know it was a mouthful. I trust it all made sense. It is a complicated situation that we're in right now. It's not really cut and dry.
I like what you say. It's very interesting, and I just like to listen. So, what are your thoughts on past lifetimes? So, I'm kind of thinking about the connection between these souls and their experience with past lifetimes and how they can use it now, what they experienced in their past lifetimes.
I think, I won't say think, I don't question myself on this. I know that because, once again, we're coming back to consciousness, depending on how conscious a being is and how much they're able to perceive and what dimensional space they're in. It's all about the perception that they're able to have within that consciousness and what they can remember. So there are children that have been born in the last 15 years or so that we are very aware of that can fly a commercial airplane at the age of 4. And they say that they remember that. And things like this have been tested where the airline, I believe it was in United Arab Emirates, the EAU, they took this child because he wanted to meet the pilot. So he had asked his parents if he could meet the pilot, and they said, well, we'll see. So they worked it out for him to meet the pilot before the flight took off. He was only about 4. And he started telling them, this child started telling them how all of these instruments worked in the aircraft and what kind of aircraft it was and everything else. Well, they wanted to test this further, so they actually set up a test, an adult test. It was not a child test at all. It was an adult test. and they did a simulation, and they had him go into a simulation where he had to operate the aircraft in just about every way possible, as though he was a certified pilot. And the child aced this test, and they actually gave him a pilot's license because it was so amazing what they had witnessed, and there was really no explanation for it other than that this 4-year-old, 4.5-year-old, I guess it would have been at that point in time when he finished his test, had a previous life in which he was a commercial airline pilot. And so, depending on what lifetime it is, we can remember, we can recall. The children that are coming in now, more and more and more of them, that have not had their abilities shut down with pharmaceutical drugs from a very young age, are remembering things. They're remembering higher dimensional colors. They're remembering who they were as warriors. They're remembering who they were as mystics and things like this. And it's very, very powerful. They're natural born healers and things like this. They have these abilities where they can see past what a lot of adults can. And there's no real explanation for this other than that they have had a lot of life experience prior. So past lives, they can surface in all kinds of different ways. They can surface in dreams, the astrals, because when we sleep, I don't say astrals because the astrals, when we leave our bodies, when we sleep, our consciousness goes elsewhere. It goes into another conscious space, goes into another dimensional space and a different level of consciousness. And we all know there are times we'll wake up feeling more tired than we were when we went to sleep. So there's definitely, something going on, and science is proving more and more and more of these things now, that our state of consciousness shifts, that we go from through the different states, the different hertz frequencies in the brain, delta and theta and etc. There's a number of different ones. And we do consciously remove ourselves and go somewhere else. So this is not simply a question of past lives in what we would imagine our past life was if we died and then we came back. This is a question of a multidimensional lives in possibly many different dimensions and consciousness levels, because we simply do not know. Now, we do have many different aspects of ourselves floating around in the universe, the particle, the quantum particle, the part of source that we become when we leave the base, if you will, when we leave the body. So say one of our cells leaves our body and becomes another being. Well, it's the same idea with source, right? There are many different source creations, and so when we leave source, we cannot simply become human beings. We have to go through different dimensional spaces. We go from zero space, which is the womb, which is the black, the darkness, the divine feminine energy, and we go through that and we come down through the dimensions. So it goes really high, like it goes way higher than 144,000 dimensions, like some people think. There's this universe and then there's other universes, and it gets really complicated, and I don't want this to get really complicated. So the answer, I guess, that I'm working on getting to is that it's not a question of our past lives, it's a question of our past consciousness states and the dimensions that we have inhabited prior. In order to get to have the experience here on Gaia, we had to go through a lot, and some of us have gone through much more than others. So it's a lot of different things all combined into one, and we will never truly know what is going on with all of those states of consciousness until we're able to fully reconnect with our source self, our source being. And we do that with self-love. So the more we learn to love ourselves, the more we remember, the more our consciousness is elevated, and the more connected we are to the whole of our being and everything that we were. I guess some would say in the past. I would simply say with an experience as source.
Wow. Yeah. I am very impressed. I am wondering, have you always had these memories and insights, or how and when did they come to you?
I always had the old soul connection. So I guess a good way to put this is, before I was 12 years old, I'd read pretty much all of the old hardcover classics. I was fascinated by things like that, and I would sit for hours and I would listen to very adult conversations, like about history and science and things like that. And I was always very, very fascinated and felt like I had a much deeper connection to that, as opposed to being outside playing with the children my age. I always wanted to be sitting there with the adults. I always wanted to push myself on that level more so than being a child. And I had a lot of responsibility at a young age. I was teaching others at a young age, so I think that may have been part of it as well. But as a music teacher I taught music for over 9 years. So I know how children are, and I was not like that. I was always trying to learn something new, whether it was picking up a new instrument or picking up a book that fascinated me, or even going out in nature and looking at a tree, and I would look at the bark and I would examine the bark and I'd touch it and I'd feel it, and I'd want to become one with that tree. I kind of always knew that there was a connection that I couldn't physically see. It's difficult to explain it, but even when I would be going through a lot of peer pressure, I didn't actually go through a lot, because I was so strong in my decision, in my choice, in my conviction. When I would tell somebody no, I didn't usually have to say it more than once, because they didn't. They knew that they were not going to be able to get me to do it unless they physically forced me to. It was a hard no. It was I don't want to do that. No, So there was really no arguing with me. And I always had that bit of, I was always fairly sovereign as a child. Like I had a mind of my own, and I knew that I was there for me. But I also had a super loving heart. I was very empathic. I could feel what everyone else was feeling always. Um, and there was always some level of telepathy that I had as well. So I was always taking on other people's emotions as my own. And I spent a lot of time alone because of that, because I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't know how to integrate other people's emotions. So, and I had a narcissistic father who told me I was crazy. So that didn't really help. But I think that I've always had that knowledge. However, it would have been um, roughly six uh, 6 or 7 years ago, I guess you would say, um, and definitely when I was pregnant with my daughter, I noticed that there was a huge stride in my consciousness being elevated. Her and I were super telepathic with each other. Like we were fully communicating. I knew it was a little girl. Um, I knew what I was supposed to name her. It wasn't what I had planned to name her. It was, she told me what her name was supposed to be. I had dreams that she was in um, years prior to having her. Um, there was a very powerful connection that little soul was telling me, um, hey, guess what? I chose you to be my mommy, and that's all there is to it. So you don't know anything until I'm actually here. But guess what? I'm going to be here. So I had that connection with her um, long before, years before actually anything happened. So there are things, and I think that more of us have these things, but very few of us will actually express it, or have really expressed very much of it, because it's not been until I would say maybe the last 5 years or so that people have even felt comfortable sharing a lot of these experiences, because yeah, they were called crazy and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember myself when I was a kid. I didn't talk to anyone about my experiences or memories. I didn't know that what I remembered or what I saw in my head were actual memories. Now I know, but I always had that connection to another world, and I always knew this here is not my original home. I come from somewhere else, and
Yes.
somewhere out there is my family, and that's nothing I made up, and I just knew that. And but I mean, I didn't even have the desire to tell anyone about this inside world. It was okay not to tell anyone. How did you experience that?
The outside world. I connected with the outside world in different ways. So I was always out in nature, or I always had my dogs around me, or things like that. When I didn't have those options, I would lose myself in my mind. I would rest a lot, or I would lose myself in my music. My music was really my escape. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
I had
mean,
the same.
it was
Yeah.
the closest thing that I had to who I felt I truly was, um, because there was nothing else um, that was giving me that. I was always craving, a loving relationship, a connection with somebody, but I didn't even know what that was because I was so feeling based. Everything was feeling based. And when now, not that I wasn't intellectually intelligent, but I certainly was not book smart, because I felt like anything that I was told I had to do, like school, was like crushing my energy, crushing my spirit, crushing my sovereignty. It's crushing my very being, because I felt like I had to do it, and I felt like there was something wrong with that, like it wasn't actually in flow with who I was. I think that's the best way to describe it, is flow. Didn't feel like things were flowing. It felt like I was wasting myself on something that did not serve me, didn't have any real purpose with my
Yeah.
being. And so I would lose myself in feeling. I was a very emotional child. I could hold my own in an adult conversation and people would have their jaws on the floor, But I I was a very emotional child, and I found my solace in being alone, simply resting and being with my pets, my animals, not other humans, um, but with the animals, and being in nature, and also with my music. So I was very disconnected in a lot of ways, but I also grew up in a very narcissistic family. So they would, if you weren't what they wanted, well, then they wouldn't do anything with you. I was the one that everybody would go on a trip, or they'd go to a special event or whatever, and I would be at home because I didn't deserve it. I hadn't earned it. I was the rebellious one, and in a very religious family, that didn't fly. Um, and rebellion can be seen in so many different ways in the religious space. It can be simply you having a mind of your own and wanting to do something different than everyone else, not necessarily hurting anybody or doing anything inappropriate, but simply not agreeing with everyone else. That is what is best for you, and that could be seen as rebellion. And so more than often it was, and I would often be in trouble, and there were a lot of spankings and things like that to bring me under control. Things that someone probably get thrown in jail for now if they did. But old-fashioned parents, I know there's a lot of people who relate to that. It really, I would kind of dissociate because it was who I was. I couldn't be somebody else unless I lied. So I learned how to misconstrue what I felt on purpose. And I guess it would have been a form of manipulation, because if I had told people how I really felt, then I would be called rebellious, or I would be called evil, or whatever else. Even though I wasn't doing anything wrong, I was simply exerting my personal feeling, and that wasn't acceptable for a child when I was, growing up in a narcissistic religious family. So yeah, I really went inside. I guess I don't know how else to say it. I really went inside of myself, and I didn't have very many connections with anyone outside of myself, unless I felt very drawn to them or very safe with them.
Yeah. Did you ever have the feeling, or did you ever believe others that you were wrong about what you felt and what you knew inside?
All of the time. All of the time. Yes. I was constantly second guessing myself. It was like a filter, because there was the true me. There was the true sovereign being that knew what she wanted and was there. Like, I knew I was pure love. That's what I knew. So I could never understand when somebody didn't respond to me in a loving way, because love was always my intention. So it was, yeah, I don't know, Evie. It was simply who I was as a being. But then all of these things started to build up, you know, these things like not understanding why things were happening around me, and then no one would tell me what was going on. Things like why my parents fought all the time. And then being told that I was part of the problem. Not being able to really understand that, because I didn't see how me being myself, simply existing, was a problem. But when parents get to that place, when any individual gets to that place where they dissociate so much from their responsibility that they go into the narcissism, they do say things that are pretty horrible to their children. So it's yeah. I mean, I remember when I, even into my adult years, up until about 6 years ago, roughly, I was still feeling like I was less than. I was still feeling like I was a nothing, like I was a nobody. I had dissociated so much from school because my father told me I would never graduate, that I would sit down and try to work on a paper, or read a book for school or whatever, and I couldn't. My brain would completely shut down. So I didn't even finish grade 12. I didn't graduate from high school. And so that was always hanging over my head. People were telling me continuously, you'll never get a job, you'll never amount to anything, you'll never be anything. And so then I was obsessed after that with having a job that showed that I didn't have to have my high school diploma or college or university in order to have a job where people still respected me. So because I was really intelligent and very sure of myself, outwardly, I was able to get different management positions, and I was running stores, and I was running restaurants, and I was, no one knew. No one knew I had not graduated from high school. I found ways not to put it on a resume and things like that. But inside, because of things that my father had said to me and my brothers and sisters had said to me, and the odd person that was going through their own stuff, I felt that. I felt like I wasn't enough. I felt like I wasn't good enough, even though at the core I knew I was. And I would defend myself as though I was. Inside, there was always that filter that I had to put everything through and fight through of, no, you're not actually qualified. You're not actually good enough. You're not this. You're not that. My father made comments when I was a child about things like me not being attractive. And so when I got older, I went into modeling. And, sometimes I wonder, I have to ask myself this, because I have an international modeling contract right now. I have to ask myself, am I still doing this because because there's a part of me that still has to prove to myself that I'm attractive enough or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just a gift that you were given, the gift of just looking like a model, and just I consider my voice as a gift to me that I give to the world. So I think it depends how you do something or what energy you put into it, you know?
Yes, and exactly the same thing with music. Once again, like I had a recording contract um, as a singer and backup guitarist in a band, and I was always second guessing myself if I was, if I was good enough, because um, of the things that people in my life who I had on a pedestal, if I can put it that way, like my father and, you know, um, people I'd been in relationships with and stuff, because they would make comments about me really not being that good or whatever. And it was simply because they needed to feel. I learned this later in life that I intimidated people, and I didn't realize that. But yeah, I mean, all of those things sunk very deep into my psyche. And I second guessed myself all of the time, even though I could listen to a recording. I could listen to a song I wrote. I could listen to whatever. And I'd be like, actually, this is not bad. But myself, I was always my own worst critic. And I think that's a huge part of being an empath as well. And I will definitely, I will definitely have to show you some pictures. I did not look like a model. It has taken a massive amount of work and self-acceptance and self-love to turn my vessel into what it is now, and I have pictures to prove it.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah, I
gonna have
mean,
a really good laugh about this later, but you can't post any of these pictures.
oh, I wanted to use it for the show banner. Um,
Oh gosh.
but yeah, I mean, I would say it's still a gift or like a potential, because I would say that no matter what I would do, I would not have that potential for being a model, which I don't care at all. Um, but I think that is just something that the potential was given to you, and even if you had to shape it or to improve it or to let it grow, the potential has been there. That's what I say right now. I mean, I haven't known you that long yet, at least in this lifetime. Um, but um, just like my voice was given to me, but at the same time, I had to work a lot to hit the notes. You know, I didn't I didn't come to Earth and then I hit every note, and I'm still I'm still working on many things to improve my music or my voice and my musical direction or style. But yeah, I think that many people often look for something that they don't have or that they are not. I don't know if it's the same here in America or in Canada. But in Germany, we have a very, very famous TV show where Heidi Klum, I think you know her, or
Mhm.
I think many, many do here, where Heidi Klum is looking for the top model, you know? And
Mhm.
then sometimes I like to watch these shows because I like to watch these shows out of a different perspective, out of a perspective that is more psychological, and also looking back at myself. Who was I when I was that age, when I was 17 or 20? What did I do, and how did I feel during that time? Um, Now I see these girls, or well, if it's in a model show, they are girls, but in any other show, in a music show, of course, there are all kinds of people. Um, and then I see these people, mostly young people, that try to achieve something that they are not, or that's just not their passion or their gift. And then, but society told them these are good things. If you are a model, or if you are a singer, or an actor, actress, um, then then you have a value. You must be a star to have a value, you know? And so many times when I was giving concerts, after that, people came to me and admired my voice or my songs, and I always thought, it's nice that they like it, but on the other hand, please don't put me on a podest. Is that how you say it, podest?
Uh, Pedestal is usually what we call it.
Oh, Podestal.
Pedestal. Yeah.
Okay. Well, please don't put me higher than you. Let's make it easy. um,
Yes.
mm, I saw these people after my concerts, and I saw people with so much potential, and people who admire something that they don't need to do or need to be. People with so many different colors that are all so wonderful. And I'm just like, maybe you can draw in a wonderful way, or maybe you are a wonderful parent, or maybe you are a wonderful janitor, or um, whatever is out there, you know. There's so much potential, and it's about passion. And I often don't understand why we admire things or gifts of others and don't really appreciate our own gifts, you know.
Oh, I feel it's all the creation aspect. When I say that, I mean that we are creating for ourselves what we want ourselves to be. As long as no one else is coming in and derailing that, we do become who and what we desire to be because we are creating it. And when we see something, so for instance, you and I'm sorry, I've got the hiccups. This is embarrassing.
You're fine.
Okay. I'm trying to be quiet. Um, okay, so when you and I, as musicians, when we see uh, a person who has a magnificent, spectacular voice, but it is so different than ours, like the type of voice that you have or that I have, doesn't matter. And one of us is looking at that person, or both of us are looking at that person, and inside we've got this dialogue going on, and we're thinking to ourselves, oh my, she's got or he's got such an amazing voice, such an incredible voice. But we know that genre of music is not for us. We wouldn't enjoy that genre of music. We wouldn't enjoy singing in that style. So we simply have this deep, deep appreciation for that other person because they're magnificent and fantastic at what they're doing. But we have no desire to be like them because we know that what they do is different than what we do. But say that the way that that person sang within the next year or so became the norm. This is what is considered a good singer. This is what is considered popular music. If you can't sing like this, even if you have a phenomenal voice, but you can't sing like this, then you're not considered very good. This is the trap we get into, I think. Because what's on the radio and what's put out there for everyone to listen to is constructed in a way that if you're not like this or you're not like that, then you're not seen as that good. Right? You're not going to sing folk music in an R&B space. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I know that we do this as well throughout our lives in pretty much every area that becomes important to us. Now, there are ones that are personally important to us, like for you and I, our voices, but let's go into a little bit, not more personal one, because our voices are very personal for us, but say relationships. Okay, this one would apply to everyone. You don't really think too much about, let's say having a certain body type, okay? You don't think too much about having a certain body type because you're good with you, okay? You're happy with you. You feel like you take care of yourself. You're good with you. But then there's this person that comes into your life and you fall head over heels for them. And you notice that your body type is not the body type that they have either had a pattern through past girlfriends or past, things they've mentioned or whatever, that you notice that you are not their ideal, or that's how you see it in your mind. That's how we see it in our minds. There's something about me that isn't the ideal that this person would like. So we start to think more about a part of us being less than perfect instead of seeing the perfection that we saw before, simply because of this other person's preference. And the person may not even have that preference. The person may think, wow, you are absolutely perfect. Your structure is perfect because, everything balances out and I'm perfectly happy with you and whatever, okay? But for us, because we now have this preconceived thought in our brain, we will always see ourselves now, because we care about that person, we want that person's approval, as being less than. So our whole mode of creation then switches, where we're no longer creating something beautiful for ourselves. We're now trying to create something beautiful for someone else. And at times, it's not even because we think it's beautiful. It's simply because we think that they will think it's beautiful. And this is not sovereign thinking. And this is where we really derail ourselves, I believe, is when we get into that feeling that if we don't please someone else, if we're not their ideal, then we're not good enough. And the sovereign being, the sovereign heart is continuously saying, if they don't accept me for where I am and who I am, then they will eventually fade out of my reality, and what is meant for me will come in. That's the sovereign way of looking at it. We don't attach fully to things to the place where they can control us or change us, or that we're creating a different space around us that we're not actually doing for ourselves. We're doing it for someone else. So it's really impossible to please someone else by what we do. We can't do it. It's impossible to please another person by doing what they want. One, because we're not challenging them to grow. And they should be challenging us to grow, and we should be challenging them to grow, because we are unlimited potential. We are quantum. We are unlimited creative energy. And so if we challenge each other, then there's something beautiful there. If we don't challenge each other, if we try to change to be like the other person, then we create a stagnant energy. So this is why I believe we have the desire to create. Like you were saying, we're born with it, or we have this natural ability. It's a part of us, to come back to the beginning. It's a part of us. It's there already, and we're simply nurturing it, and we're simply creating it into something more beautiful. It's like you start with a sketch, and then you bring in some color, and then you might bring in full painting. You know, you might fully paint that portrait, and you might look at it a year later and say, I think I could add this, or I think I could add that. And that's what it's like. It's not changing the portrait for anyone but yourself. And then whatever's meant for us will come into our vibration, because we are creating the most beautiful sovereign being, and that is ourself, that we can. And it's going to be a beautiful vibration for, we are going to be a beautiful vibration for whomever comes in contact with us, whether that's our voice, whether that's what people see visually, whether that is a gift that you have to teach, or there's so many different things I could put into the same perspective here. But I know you know what I'm talking about, Evie, and I know that got a little long-winded, but I was really feeling it come in. Like, it was really important to talk about the relationship between what we are born with and what we have the natural desire to be and do, and the programming that we need to be and do for someone else in order to be enough.
Yeah. Wonderful words. So for a long time, I've tried to be myself, but I still tried to build myself. I didn't just let myself happen. I didn't trust that what naturally comes is good enough. I wanted to shape it, and I wanted to find out who am I, but on the other side, I wanted to control it, to shape it, and to only let out what I think is okay. So there was still that part that wanted to please. I wanted to be myself, but I also wanted to please others at the same time. And that was just not working. And it took me years to just let go of that resistance, because it was resistance against myself or against my natural self. I had to understand that I don't have to shape myself. I don't have to be the picture that I'm drawing about myself or of myself. I just can be. And then, of course, when there's negative thoughts or anything, of course, I try to control those thoughts or emotions. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the natural me that comes out when I have no resistance against the outside or the inside. The pure love that comes out when I'm writing a song or when I am singing a song for others. And I had many concerts where I could actually learn exactly that. I wanted to be someone else, or I still wanted to be me, but the created me. So when I had concerts, I just could only be myself. It was not working trying to be the picture that I saw of myself. And the good thing is, people liked that. People liked exactly that, that I was very natural, very authentic. They didn't mind that I couldn't play the guitar in a perfect way. They were okay that I was doing mistakes or that I forgot the lyrics then and there. And I think that is something so important to bring into this world, to show you're okay with all your imperfections. You can show what you are and what you have already. You don't have to be perfect. Show the process. Show the process of your creation or the process of yourself, you know? So I'm very glad now that I had so many concerts where people obviously liked what I did. And the more natural it was, and the more I thought, but there was nothing special. That was just me. There was no glitter, no sparkle, no fireworks. It was just me, like me, as if I walk by or as if I walk down the streets. That's how I felt. But exactly that was what the people liked. And in those times when I thought, oh, this was really good, this was really cool, I this is what I wanted to do, this is how I wanted to be. And the people usually did not like that. So I actually just had to learn to just be myself and, of course, improve what I can improve. But I had to learn to let go of the resistance against the natural me.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. The ways we find ourselves are usually through um, experiences that teach us that that was the best person to be all along. Um, it doesn't always end that way because we never truly go back to being the person that we were before. After gaining that knowledge, we become wiser, and we see things in ourselves because we have more perspective that we didn't see before. So those people's reactions, I I hear you. I hear you. I have been through almost verbatim the same um, experience. Um, but I think there is a bit of a rebellion that we eventually um, develop. It's like going through really difficult experiences in this lifetime that are full of guilt, shame, competition, fear, judgment, all of those things. When we start to elevate our consciousness, we do that because we start to get sick of those lower vibrations. We really don't want anything to do with them after a while. After we've gone through enough pain, it's like, okay, this isn't cool anymore. I don't want to be the victim anymore, you know? Like,
Exactly.
I'm tired of complaining about being, this and that and things not working out in my life. And, no one wants to hear it. It's not a vibration that people want to be around, but it gets us attention originally, especially when we're younger. And so I think that's kind of why we hang on to it. I remember for the longest time, I could not accept a compliment from someone because I felt like, okay, this is going to sound so bad, Evie. This is going to sound so bad. I felt like someone who complimented me was actually an idiot because I didn't feel like I had done well enough to receive a compliment. So I either felt like someone was trying to placate me, or I felt like someone had no idea what they were talking about, or, um, maybe someone was trying to flatter me, depending on who the person was, or, that gave me the compliment. And so I'm sure you've experienced that as well. Or maybe you haven't. Maybe you never went to that degree of actually like of feeling that way towards someone else. But I could never accept a compliment until um, several years ago, actually, when I could finally um, see myself as being worthy of a compliment. That was a breakthrough. That was a milestone for me when I could actually say, "Thank you. That's very um, it's very kind of you." So I would always be giving a compliment back to the person, and that's how I would absorb a compliment myself. Um, I was never the kind of person who could be like, "Oh yeah, I know, I was awesome." You know, that was not me. Um, so I always found a way to return the compliment with a compliment of my own, and then I felt that balanced the energy.
Yeah. I mean, I think, at least here in America, it's very different from Germany. I don't know how it is in Canada, but in Germany, it's basically forbidden to say things like, "Yeah, I did a good job." So,
It's very
and
efficient. Yeah.
that's very sad, actually. Um, and here in America, I think it's more common that people can say that. Mm, but yeah, what I wanted to say, or what I wanted to add is, I think it's a general problem or general challenge that people don't know or are afraid of receiving something good. It's not just compliments, it's receive the good in life. And so I think often we have a resistance against receiving something because maybe we mistrust the things that are coming towards us, or maybe we think we don't deserve something good. But that's the part of receiving, to just receive and be open for it. Like for a compliment, be open for it and just receive the compliment. And I think that makes life kind of easier. I experienced all kinds of emotions when receiving compliments. Sometimes I thought, oh yeah, finally someone saw me and my potential. And then in other moments, I found it weird, especially in moments where everything was so natural and it didn't feel special. I mean, I'm not just talking about my voice or my music. I'm also talking about some days when I had no makeup or just some glitter in my face, so very little. And then I received lots of compliments. And I was like, huh? Don't you see the rings under my eyes? Don't you see how this and that is not perfect? But for some reason, I received compliments. And then on other days, when I thought today, I look good. Then there were no compliments, or maybe there were actually negative reactions because my ego was a bit too big and thought today is such a good looking day for me, So yeah, I think whatever is natural is fine, you know.
There's two sides to that, if I may. Um, Two sides that I truly it's they're so close and yet they're so far apart. Because when you don't do anything with yourself, very seldom are we ever coming across in a way that is threatening to someone else. Um, we will usually be seen as, especially for other women, um, less intimidating. And so people will respond according to their vibration. And if you seem intimidating to someone because you truly do look so good, okay, you're shining, you're glowing, you think you look wonderful, you're there, you're in that place. It is a vibrational elevation. It's a switch. And so the people around you may not be in that same elevated energy, especially if they're used to seeing you in a lower energy, one that isn't quite so elevated. Then it's a mismatch in vibration because you went up and they stayed where they were. And then there's the other side of it, which is if we're not there in that higher vibration, we're in that lower vibration, we're in that lower conscious state because we don't think we look so good, then people will tend to be a little bit more, they'll pick up on an energy that we are lower than them. This happens all the time. You think, oh, somebody really doesn't take care of themselves, or, oh, well, she'd be really pretty if she just did something with herself, and then people tend to respond a little bit more nicely because they don't see you as competition, they don't see you as a threat, they don't see you as, what was the word that I was using before? Intimidating. And this is not true in all cases, but I would say about 90% of the time, it's if you give out a higher energy than the people in your circle are used to, they will respond negatively, not positively, because you're no longer a matching vibration. And vice versa, if you are in a lower space and you're usually in a higher space, they'll tend to be a little bit more complimentary and whatnot because they see someone as being, I don't like to say this, but it's true because most people really have not rid themselves of the ego yet. They tend to see you as below them, so they feel more comfortable giving a compliment.
Yeah.
That's my personal experience and what I've seen with a lot of other people. And so I really do feel even there, it really comes down to the different vibrations that we're sending out. Very few people feel comfortable giving someone a true compliment when they see them as equal or possibly are intimidated by them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, so I think we're coming to the end of the show, and I could talk to you and listen to you for hours, so I hope I hope we will have many, many, many more shows here. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. It's just wonderful. I'm happy, and I hope the audience will be happy too.
This is utterly lovely, Evie. Like the openness, the total open energy portal we have between us, sharing things that are more personal, are more ego-based, um, things that we've had personal struggles with. Really, just the openness and the honesty and the beautiful energy happening here is it's truly an honor doing this with you. I'm very grateful.
Thank you. I mean, that is exactly what I want in this show. And that's why it's called Colors of the Universe, because there are so many colors. Every person brings so many colors in their own specific, unique color. And I I want to create a space where we can be personal, where we can share our thoughts, our failures, our success, etc., etc., because it's all parts of the universe, all colors of the universe. So thank you so much for joining that. We will talk soon again. I'm very excited already, and thank you everyone for listening. I hope you will have a nice day or night wherever you are, and tune in again.
Thank you for listening to Colors of the Universe here at Studio 3 on Ascension Radio. If you enjoy what we're doing, please send a donation via the PayPal button on radio.mpeg.org. Find more amazing content and updates on our Facebook page. And now, just be your colorful self and enjoy your day.